Last week, Donald Trump tried to blunt a little bit of the attention that the DNC and the Democrats were getting, and let's be honest, it was a ton because they were crushing the Republicans. But Donald Trump decided to head down to Arizona, actually on the border between Arizona and Mexico, on Thursday, where he gave not only one of the most low-energy performances we have ever seen from the former president, but also, rather than talking about policy, instead what Donald Trump did was highlight his mental deficiencies. See, at one point, while Donald Trump was supposed to be talking about border security, border policy, he instead decided to talk about Minnesota, which I don't know how familiar you are with U.S. geography, but Minnesota is not a southern border state. Okay, they're really not having a ton of issues with people hopping that border in Minnesota. Okay, so Trump decided to start ranting and raving in very low energy form, which was weird, about Minnesota, and said that he would have won there if not for a very weird reason. So I will let Trump himself explain to you the reason that he did not win in Minnesota. But again, he was supposed to be talking about immigration and instead did this.
His numbers are horrible. People are fleeing his state. I love his state. We should have won his state twice, but a lot of hanky panky goes on there. Hasn't been won since 1972. Richard Nixon was the last one to win it. But every time I go in there, we have massive crowds and everything's good, but nobody seems to be able to win it. So I know why we didn't win it. People don't like to talk about it. But he's
hanky panky in Minnesota. That is why Donald Trump did not win the state in 2016 or 2020. All that damn hanky panky taking place in Minnesota. Now, everybody knows what hanky panky means, right? It means romantic relations, okay? So I don't know, I cannot dumb down my own brain enough to try to figure out why Donald Trump used that phrase to describe what he thinks is a stolen election. So we're only left to guess what's going on in Donald Trump's demented little brain. Does he think that everybody up in Minnesota, like all these election workers, were just too busy with hanky panky to count the votes, right? Like the whole thing turned into some, bacchanal type, just absolute sin fest. And we couldn't count the votes. We were all too busy in the bedroom. I don't know. I don't know what he means, but I do know, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, that he did not have the election stolen from him in Minnesota. And I seriously doubt that there was just so much hanky-panky going on that people couldn't even be bothered to count the votes. That doesn't even make any sense. And I tell you, if that is what's happening in Minnesota, the wife and I are probably going to pack up and go move there because it sounds like a fun time. But it's not. My wife would never move to Minnesota. She's a Wisconsinite. They've got pride. She'll never do it. But that aside, the low energy that Donald Trump came to with that rally, this weird, rambling, hanky-panky in Minnesota, none of it made any sense. None of it. But here's the funnier part. The media didn't talk about it. Instead, Politico ran this headline about that speech I just showed you. Trump drags Harris over border policy as she readies acceptance speech. And then the article from Politico continues. Former President Donald Trump took his Democratic National Convention counter-programming message on illegal immigration to battleground Arizona on Thursday as his newly minted Democratic opponent prepared to take the stage in Chicago. Trump had been trolling Harris throughout Thursday ahead of her appearance in Chicago, beginning with a Fox News interview in the morning, the visit to the southern border in the middle of the day, and plans to post his play-by-play of the DNC's primetime speakers. So Politico framed this as, oh man, Donald Trump got her, right? Look at him trolling her down there at the border. They did not, in any of this 4-page article that was nothing more than a puff piece for Donald Trump, they did not once mention hanky-panky. In fact, I actually had to Google Trump hanky panky and nothing came up. Maybe that's different now. Maybe other outlets have finally started to pick it up, but nobody had picked it up. I only saw this because of that post on social media from user at ACYN. Like, that's where I saw it. But the media totally ignored it. This is a prime example of not only Donald Trump's very clear cognitive decline, but also a very clear example of how the media doesn't frickin' cover it. This man went down there, sounded like he was completely out of batteries, didn't know what in the hell he was talking about, goes on about hanky-panky in Minnesota, airs his election grievances, and if you only got your information about this performance from Politico, you'd never know that the man sounded like he's the one who escaped from an insane asylum. You wouldn't know that. And that's what pisses me off the most about these kinds of stories. This is not a story about Donald Trump talking about border policy. He didn't talk about policy. He talked about mass deportations, which even his own Republicans have admitted would decimate the United States economy. Also, by the way, not mentioned in the Politico article. In fact, I'm actually kind of shocked that Politico did mention that Donald Trump encouraged Republicans to tank the bipartisan border bill earlier this year, although they buried it in like the fourth paragraph from the end of this 4-page story. But they did put, Trump earlier this year discouraged Republicans from agreeing to a bipartisan border deal that Biden backed. In turn, the president issued an executive order in June to suspend asylum cases when the border sees an average of 2,500 crossings a day over a 7-day period. Illegal border crossings plummeted as a result. Kind of seems like a very important fact that probably should have been, if not in one of the first paragraphs, at least on the first page. But you guys literally buried that at the end of the 4th page of this story that was already 10 times longer than it should have been. The story should have been about Donald Trump's failing mental health. It should have been about Donald Trump's complete inability to stay on message. It should have been about the fact that he's supposed to be talking about the border and instead is ranting about why he doesn't win Minnesota because of all the hanky-panky. But you didn't include any single bit of that. And the language you used to talk about Donald Trump killing the border bill, he discouraged them. He flat out told them not to do it. That wasn't discouraging. He ordered them not to do it. Now, Politico, I have always thought that it is a crap organization. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend any of the writers at Politico, but you guys are very great at burying the leads. You're amazing in your ability to leave out vital information and context. But you're really great at making something seem like something totally different than what was actually on film. That takes talent. I mean, y'all should be writers for Hollywood with your ability to take something that is real and turn it into something that is definitely fiction. So if any of you ever lose your jobs at Politico, head on straight to LA because you can definitely make it as a fantasy writer, but y'all really, really suck when it comes to writing about what's actually happening in this country. Hi, everyone. This here is little Athena, and Athena would like to know why you haven't subscribed to Fair and Balanced yet. So please, don't let Athena down. Subscribe today.